Hi there.
Are we on?
You are.
I guess so. All right. Um, my name's Eric Flint. I'm an author who's written quite a few science fiction fantasy novels. Most of them, a majority, are alternate history, but I write a lot of other stuff. And I also set up with Walt. This is Walt Boyce on the other side, and he and I and Joy Warden, my wife Lucille, we set up Ring of Fire Press. Well, originally I set it up about 7 years ago. Um, and the reason I set it up was because, as those of you who have read the 1632 series were probably already aware, we have always had a close involvement from fans in that series. And that goes all the way back to the very first novel, 1632, which I wrote in the summer and fall of 1999. And while I was writing it, I posted the chapters as I wrote them on Bane's website. There's a discussion in their area, and they're called Bane's Bar. And they created a special conference for the purpose called 1632 Tech, which is still there. The reason I did it was there were a lot of technical questions that came up in the course of writing a book, and the amount of research I would have had to do on my own to answer all the questions would have been rather prohibitive, but with a number of fans participating, many of whom were experts, I could just have them correct me as I wrote the manuscript. And, they would say, that doesn't work, Eric, whatever. Anyhow, that's how the novel got written. So it had fan involvement from the very beginning. And very shortly thereafter, uh, the fans started actually writing fan fiction. And I discussed this with the publisher of Baen Books, Jim Baen. Um, and I raised with him the idea of doing an anthology that would consist of about half of it would be stories that we would solicit from established authors, but we set the other half of the anthology aside for fans writing for it. And Jim thought it was a good idea, and we tried it. So we solicited stories from David Weber, Mercedes Lackey, several other authors, but we also set aside about half the book was set aside for fans, and we got a total of over 100 stories submitted, of which I selected nine, as I recall, which were published in that first anthology, which was called Ring of Fire. That came out in 2003, as I recall correctly. And what happened after that was the fans kept writing and submitting it on Bane's website. And at that point, I went to Jim Bain and I said, I raised the idea with him of launching an electronic magazine that would be where we could publish this stuff. Jim thought the idea was interesting, but he didn't want to get involved directly himself. So what he proposed to me instead was he lent me $4,000 and I'd set it up and then I'd pay him back, and that's how we did it. So the magazine, it's called the Grantville Gazette, started in 2003, I believe, or 2004. But for the first few years, we ran it on a sort of semi-pro basis. There was no regular publication schedule. Just whenever we had enough stories to have another issue, we'd put it out. We paid writers. We didn't pay them much. I think it was like 2 cents a word or something like that. And we did several issues that way. And then in 2007, because it was going quite well, and by then the 1632 series, a number of more novels had come out, and it was doing quite well. So I discussed it with Walt and the person who was the first. Well, the first editor had been a woman named Cheryl Detweiler, but Cheryl passed away a long time ago. She had a heart attack and a stroke. It was really terrible. She was quite young at the time. And I asked Paula Goodlett if she wanted to be the editor, and she said yes. So starting in May of 2007, we began publishing the Granville Gazette as a professional magazine. And it has been published that way ever since. Starting with, I think, about the 10th issue. It comes out every 2 months on schedule. It pays rates that are accepted as professional rates by the Science Fiction Writers Association. It's been recognized by SIFWA for 13 years now as a
Hmm.
qualifying venue for for writers who want to get qualified to be professional writers and join the Science Fiction Writers Association. Paula edited it for a long time, and then about 3-4 years ago, Paula basically had enough, and she said she wanted to sort of just concentrate on her own writing. So,
has it only been 3 or 4 years? It's only been 3 or 4 years. It seems like it's been forever.
I know. I don't really know for sure, Walt. I'd have to go back and check. But for several years now, Walt has been the editor of Granville Gazette magazine. The problem we ran into, and then what would happen, just to explain the complexity of all this, is the magazine, after a while, Baen Books would agree to publish an anthology of stories from the Gazette that initially was a direct one-to-one. It was the first, second, third, and fourth issues of, the second, third, and fourth issues of the a magazine were directly transcribed into a Baen book anthology. But after a while, it became obvious that we couldn't keep this up because we were outstripping. There's no way Baen could publish that many paper anthologies. So what we started doing with volume 5 of Baen Books Granville Gazette is it started becoming a best of format. And we would select stories from about 15 issues of the Gazette, and they would be reissued as stories in a Baen Books anthology, which would be published in hardcover and come out later in mass market paperback as well as ebooks. I should explain the Gazette is only published electronically. That began with Baen issue number, it was Gazette 5. And in order to keep them distinct, the Baen paper editions are numbered with a Roman numeral, whereas the Gazette electronic, the magazine itself, is numbered with Arabic numbers. We are now up to issue 90. Actually, we're about to launch issue 91 in right. About a week. We're running, so we have now Gazette 9, Baen's Gazette 9 is going to appear in July of next year. That's how far we've gotten along. Anyway, the whole thing's been very successful, but the problem we started running into was the magazine, we publish long-running serial stories, which most magazines nowadays don't do anymore, but we have people writing in the 1632 setting who write, long-running stories. They're not short stories. The problem was that we could not reissue those as part of the Baen anthologies because they're too long. They would just take up most of the space in an anthology. So they just didn't get reissued. And eventually I realized that with modern publishing the way it is, there was no reason I couldn't start self-publishing this stuff. It's stuff that Baen wouldn't publish. It was not really suitable for Baen Books. So I discussed it with Tony Weisskopf, who was by then the publisher of Baen, because Jim Baen passed away in 2006. And the arrangement I have with Tony is that Baen will always get first crack at anything, but there's more stuff gets written in the series than Baen can publish. So what happened was we set up Ring of Fire Press and started publishing it as books of our own. For the first few years, though, we did it the same way we did the magazine. It was done on a kind of, I don't want to say half-assed, but it was a sort of semi-pro basis.
Ad hoc would be a good way. Ad hoc would be a good way.
Ad hoc. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's a better one. The covers were just whatever we could find in the public domain. We put it on the cover just to save money. And we'd publish occasionally, and we were able to get some stories out, but it was kind of desultory. And then beginning toward the end of 2017, Walt and Joy Ward, who's Walt's wife, approached me and suggested that we actually do this seriously, since we actually had a publishing house by then, and that we didn't have to keep it restricted to 1632 series material. We could publish anything we wanted. So beginning in February of 2018, we started doing the publishing house much more serious than we had before. And so we now have, I pay professional artists to do the covers. We have a professionally proofread, and we're doing it the way a publishing house is really supposed to operate. And for the first couple of years, we published twice a month. Starting a few months ago, we started publishing 3 books a month, and now we're actually moving in the beginning of October. We're going to start publishing a new book every week. We are right now have published about 70 volumes of the Gazette. And as of now, this publishing house that began solely for the purpose of publishing 1632 series stories, and we still do that. But as of now, about 3/4 of what we publish is actually of general science fiction and fantasy. It's not connected to the 1632 series. Anyhow, that is the origins and history of Ring of Fire Press. And I am now going to turn it over to Walt to talk about what we're aiming to do now and the way we see the press.
Well, what we've done is exactly what Eric said. We've grown the press to the point where we publish a wide variety of science fiction, fantasy, alternate history, and we do a lot of it. And we do it both from authors who grew up in the 1632 series, like David Carrico and some others. And we also do it from well-established authors who have been either without a publisher for a while or haven't been able to sell a particular book. Frankly, if I think it's good, I want to buy it and I want to publish it. And we have a really good deal that we offer authors. And most authors go, really? Cool. I'll do that. We even have relatively well-known authors, not necessarily known as science fiction and fantasy authors, like Cecilia Holland. Cecilia Holland has written science fiction. She has written historical fantasy, but she's much better known as one of the greatest living historical fiction authors of this time. And we'll be publishing half dozen of her historical fiction over the next 4 or 5 months. And we're doing this because we're getting known for being able to put out a high quality book, both in e-format and in trade paperback. We're willing to work with authors. Some people who have come to us have never published a novel before. One of the people whose novel we just published is a guy by the name of Stephen Silver, who, while he's well known as in fandom, has never published a novel before. And he wrote a wonderful novel called After Hastings, which is what happens if William the Conqueror didn't, and what happened afterwards. We have a whole variety of 1632 focused stories, including the first American Revolution, which happened in New Mexico, where the Native Americans got together and chased the Spanish out. And in the 1632 universe, they managed to keep them out. In the original timeline, of course, not so much. This is a really going concern now, and we're always looking for new authors. Putting my Gazette hat on for a minute, I want to see new authors writing for the Gazette. It pays standard SIFWA rates, and you can get published in the Gazette fairly. Write something good, and I'll publish it. If you want to send me a novel to look at, I'll be happy to do that too. One of the things that we've always done, because of the way this whole project got started, with Eric agreeing to teach newbies how to write, basically, is that we have taken people who turned in something not quite good enough to publish, and we workshop with them until they get it right. We're about the only publishing house that's actually willing to do that. We do that for the short stories for the Gazette on Baines Bar in the 1632 Slush and Slush Comments places. And what we have is we have a serious stable of writers. The 1632 universe has turned out approximately 160 new writers who never had professionally published before in fiction. And I'm very proud of that. I know Eric is very proud of that. And we keep buying from new writers. And we keep buying from people who take a flyer at something for Ring of Fire Press. An interesting new novel that we're publishing shortly is called Marked Territory by a fellow by the name of Neil Litherland, who is better known as a comic artist and a games writer. Neil decided that he wanted to write a story about a tomcat in a film noir. It reads like a combination of Watership Down and Mike Hammer Private Eye, and it's excellent. It's coming out shortly, and don't miss it because it's a good one. We have a whole bunch of new books coming out, and if you want to see what they are, by all means go to www.ringoffirepress.com and look at forthcoming. It's a really great thing to do. The thing that I'm proudest of is that we are helping authors who were perfectly happy to be mid-list authors get back into print because they got fired by their by the bean counters that have taken over their original marks, and now because they don't sell like Stephen King, they're out looking for somebody to publish their work. Marella Sands is a case in point. She's given us a marvelous trilogy about what would happen if Lincoln lost the 1864 election. But she doesn't tell it from 1864. She tells it from 2019 or 2020. So what's happened in a century and a half after the South has continued to be a different country than the North. It's a fascinating look at what might happen, what has happened, and the way people are. Marella Sands. Eric, has the third volume come out yet? Or
third volume is out. Just came out.
Third volume's out. Okay.
I think she's working on a fourth one, if I remember right.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the third one came out about 2-3 weeks ago.
We also allow authors to write something that they're not well known for. Tom Doyle, who is extremely well known for military science fiction, has just written a story that's way out on the edges of science fiction called Border Crosser. And we were delighted to publish it. It's good, excellent, think about it science fiction. Also, we've allowed people like David Carrico, who's better known for 1632 and for his collaboration with Eric in Eric, help me. The name of that series.
Jow Universe series.
The Jow Universe series.
Yeah, David and I wrote. Go ahead.
we've allowed him to publish what he really wants to write, which is high fantasy. And he's good. He's really, really good at it. And we can repay him for being really, really good at it by buying and reading his books. And also that repays us for publishing it. I do all the reading, and Joy Ward and I do the selection of books. We seem to just get books tossed at us and we take a look at them. I'm looking at a first novel right now by a guy who is an expert on industrial cybersecurity, and I'm looking to see how that will turn out. Plus, we also do some flyers. We're going to start publishing the Tom Corbett novels. You want to talk about that, Eric?
Yeah, we decided to start a YA line, young adult fiction line, and partly it's because two of our long-established authors, Gorkoff and Paula Goodlett, who have also co-authored a number of novels with me, both in the 1632 series and outside it. But they also work on their own, and they have written a couple of young adult novels, which we're going to publish. But what I had always, when I was a kid, I read the Tom Corbett series. I must have been 12 years old or something. I was back in the, God, it would have been the 50s. And they're part of the classic era of young adult. I'll be honest, they're not as good as Robert Heinlein's or Henry Norton's books, but they're awfully fun. And they actually started as a very popular TV series, and then it spun off into novels and a comic strip that was published for a while. Almost all that stuff is now in the public domain. So what we decided to do is reissue it. And starting on September 20th, we'll reissue the first of the books, which is titled Stand By for Mars. That's the introduction to the Tom Corbett story. And what we're also doing is, with our regular artist, Laura Gibbons, we're also redoing the comics, and we're publishing the first of the comic books with it. So it's a combined volume. And we're going to go through the first 7. There are 8 novels written total. One of them is not in the public domain, and we're not going to publish that one. For one thing, I don't even know how I'd find who has the rights to it at this point. But we will publish everything that's in the public domain. And we're doing the same thing with Cecilia Holland. Agreed to let us publish a number of her novels, including one she'd just written, which we're coming out with on September 10th. It's called Heart of the World. For those of you who don't read historical fiction, Cecilia is one of the top writers of historical fiction in the English language, and has been for a long time. So we were really thrilled that she agreed to let us. We're publishing a total so far of, I think it's 6, Walt? Five books by her. And she's trying to see if she can get the rights back, some other ones, and let us have them. Since we're doing that, we figured, all right, we'll just expand the Ring of Fire Press to include historical fiction, because one of our authors, Stoney Compton, whom I've known, been a friend of mine since 1993, he's best known for his science fiction, but he has also written some really terrific historical fiction. And so he agreed to let us issue that, republish it. So we're going to be starting fairly soon with a terrific book of his called Treadwell. That's set in Alaska, which is where he lived many, many years of his life. Just to back up this, first of all, I should tell people, if you have any questions you want to ask us, you can put them into the auditorium. What is it? The Auditorium Odd, I think it's called. Type them in there in Discord, and they will be transmitted over to us, and we'll be glad to answer any questions anyone has. I just want to back up a little bit and explain how we publish. We publish in 3 formats. We publish electronically, we publish paper editions, print on demand, and we are now starting to do audiobooks. We used to do small print runs of our own paper, but very small, about 20 copies, which we would use at at Comic-Cons for sales through Barge Tower Comic-Cons. We've suspended that for the moment for the obvious reason that Comic-Cons are not happening right now due to the pandemic. What we don't do is try to distribute through bookstores, and I'll explain why we don't. The problem, if you do that, you get into a whole different order of the problem there is that if you publish through the big distributors that are major bookstore chains, you have to be willing to accept returns. And we are simply not big enough and not set up to do that. And the problem isn't even money. It's more a matter of labor. I do not want my creaky old body hauling books up and down from my basement every time a bookstore decides to return something. So we are staying away from that, at least for the time being. That may change in the future, but for right now, we publish in those formats. To my surprise, actually, the print-on-demand sales generates about 25% of our income, which is more than I thought it would. But a lot of people still want paper editions, and we're able to do that by we go through Amazon to do that. Our basic, we have one big advantage that most small presses don't have, which is that because we started in the 1632 series, and it's still based there in many ways, that gives us a financial stability that most small presses don't have, because 1632 series is quite popular. And so we have a kind of stable platform that we're able to expand out from. And what that enables us to do is we can be pretty relaxed about authors that we take on. But the basic only rule we follow is if either Walt or Joy or me likes a book, we'll publish it. And we just don't worry much about, how much money is it going to make. Books will usually, over time, at least cover their own costs or come close enough to it that I'm not going to worry about it. And I've been an author now since 1997, and I know what life is like from an author's point of view. And one of the things that's really frustrating for authors is what they call mid-list, which basically means every author except the ones who sell well enough that they can be the lead writer for a publisher and make a living at it, is mid-list writers get dropped pretty regularly, especially from major corporate publishers. Basically they'll give you 3 books, and if you're not making a good chunk of money in 3 books, they'll drop you, even though your books may be doing okay. And we just don't have that attitude. We'll keep publishing someone as long as we like what they're writing. I do need to explain one thing, because people ask us this. We do not accept unsolicited submissions of manuscripts. And the reason we don't is basically the same reason we don't want to get into returns. We just simply aren't big enough to have the labor force. What happens if you have an open submission policy is you get flooded with manuscripts. And when I say flooded, I don't mean dozens. You will get hundreds a year. And we simply, right now, we can give authors a quick turnaround. We can give them a response quickly. If we start doing that, we're starting in a situation when an author submits a book to us and they have to wait a year or 2 to get a response, which we don't want to get into that. So what we do is there's a sort of screen that we use that, you can reach us, but you have to go through one or another mechanism to do it. And I'll explain what they are. The main ones are, first, submit something, a short story, through the Granville Gazette magazine that Walt edits. And keep in mind, that does not have to be a 1632 series story. We do publish those, and that is a very good way to get started. But we also publish in every issue at least one story that is of general interest in science fiction or fantasy in what's called the Universe Annex. The origin of that name is that we were the group that used to publish, or not publish, we used to edit Jim Bain's Universe magazine for the 4 years it was in existence, from 2006 to 2010. We had to, Bain finally closed it down because it was losing money. The frustrating thing looking back on it is, I think if we were premature. If we'd started after Amazon launched Kindle, we probably could have made it. But back in the 1906 to 1906, 2006 to 2010 period, Kindle didn't exist. So there was no established single platform for ebooks. So we came close. We couldn't quite make it, but we've always looked back on that period fondly. So we created what we call the Universe Annex in Grantville Gazette, which is sort of a tip of the hat to Jim Bain's universe. And we do publish every issue. We'll publish at least one, sometimes two, stories that are not part of the 1632 universe. So if you want to submit something there, go to Bain's Bar, which is Bain Books. It's on Bain Books' website. Just go to the website and look for Bain's Bar. It's their discussion area. When you get into Bain's Bar, you'll see a number of conferences. And where we publish the 1632 material is in the three conferences called 1632 Tech, 1632 Slush, and 1632 Slush Comments. And we're taking the annex stories still through Jim Bain.
Yeah, we're taking annex stories through the Universe Annex Crit group on Bain's Bar. And that's one of the few things where someone can, if I know somebody is a really good writer and they ask me if they can send me a story, I'm absolutely delighted to have them do it. Edward M. Lerner, for example, sends me stories all the time. We have a new Edward M. Lerner story in the Universe Annex coming out in September, and several of his coming out all the way through to the first of the year. We do that. We have other authors who we publish, but mostly what we're trying to do is to build new authors by teaching them how to write professionally. And I want to say something on behalf of both the Grantville Gazette and Ring of Fire Press, and that is that we are seriously looking for authors who are not in the mainstream of authors. We are looking for people of color. We are looking for people of whatever gender. What we are looking for is people who can write, not who they are, not what they are, and certainly not who they sleep with. We're looking for people who can write well, and we'll publish people who write well. And if you write acceptably but not well, we'll teach you how to write well. We've been, like I said, we've been doing that for ever since 1999, and we have graduated into the ranks of professional authors, at least 160 men and women who have gone on to have professional writing careers, writing fiction.
Yeah, I should mention that most, for those of you who follow the 1632 series, and Bain has so far published, I believe it's 24, I think maybe 25th novel just came out, with another one coming out in November. To be honest, I lose count exactly where we are. Most of, a number of those I've written on my own, but I collaborate a lot. And most of my co-authors are actually people who start off as fan writers inside the 1632 series and learn to write that way. And I have written a number of novels with them. A few of them I've written with established authors, David Weber, Chuck Gannon, Walter Hunt, but most of them are actually people who emerged from sort of inside the series. And we have always, we look out for them. One advantage to publishing a short story through the Grantville Gazette, whether you go either through the 1632 series or you go to the annex where you're submitting something that's not part of the 1632 series, is, as Walt said, it's sort of a combined submission and workshop at the same time. You can submit a story, don't even have to have finished it, and you'll get feedback. And the advantage that has is if you submit the traditional way across the transom, it's an up or down proposition. You'll either get accepted or rejected. And if you get rejected, they're not going to want to see it a second time. Whereas with us, you've got more leeway. There are other ways that we find authors, and the two main ones, other than the Gazette, is I am one of the founders and instructors at the Superstars Writing Seminar that has happened every year in Colorado Springs since we launched the first one in 2010. Now, I'm not sure. I doubt we're going to be able to hold the next one in Colorado Springs live the way we have in the past. I think we'll probably wind up having to do it virtually, but we'll still have it one way or the other. And I have met a lot of the authors we publish. A number of them I have met through the Superstar Seminar, and specifically the way I meet a number of them is I teach a seminar there every year called How to Start a Novel. And what it is that writers will submit to me the first 3 chapters of a novel they've written, and then I will critique it, but I'll critique it with everyone else's, and everybody's part of the discussion, so people can see each other's novels and see the points I'm making in general. And several of the people that we have either published or are going to publish came through that seminar of mine. And I either liked the novel that they'd submitted and said, let me see the whole manuscript, or I'd say, let me see it. In case of one person, they sent it to me. I said, this needs to be reworked. Here's how to do it. And so that's how we get a number of our new authors. The other way we can do it is I'm also one of the judges in the Writers of the Future contest. For those of you familiar with it, it's the largest contest for new writers in existence in the English language. And actually, I suspect probably in any language. And it is run, all you have to do is just Google Writers of the Future and just follow their instructions. They submit stories, and I have gotten to know a number of new authors through that process as well. Like I said, we're simply not in a position to accept manuscripts directly over the transfer from people we don't know, because what would wind up happening is we'd just get flood buried. And then we'd have to take a year or two to respond, which is exactly what we don't want to do. One of the great frustrations for new authors, and trust me, I remember, is you send in a book and you wait 2 years to hear anything. And then it's like, no, we don't want it after all. And, we can move a lot faster than that. It's one of the advantages of going through a small press. We do publish some things from very well-established authors. We got a book coming out from David Drake in a couple of months. A while back, a year or so ago, we published a short novel by David Gerald called Getting into Spaceship. One thing we can do because of the way we publish is we can publish shorter stuff than a major commercial publisher will accept. A major commercial publisher is going to want a novel that's a minimum of 80,000 words long. And whereas with the kind of electronic POD printing and publishing we do, you can publish successfully stories that are shorter than that. So there are some very well-established authors who have, stories they wrote a while ago that are, 40,000 words or more that are just too short to publish through a commercial publisher, but we'll reissue it for them. And we do quite well with that. Just briefly to explain what how our contract works. We have a very simple contract. The one thing we do to make it very friendly for authors, and I do this from my own long experience as an author, is I teach a class at the Superstars Writing Seminar on how to analyze a contract. And the thing I tell people is the very first thing you want to look at is the reversion rights. Make sure that you can get the book back if it turns out that, it's not a deal that you think is working in your favor. And when I created this publishing house, we revert rights back in 1 year. Most publishers will keep it for years. We don't. Once we acquire the rights to the book, we keep it for 1 year unless we do an audiobook. If it's an audiobook, we'll keep it for 5 years because there's more involved in doing an audiobook. But electronically and in paper, that's it. 1 year and you get it back. So if you're not happy with the way it's going, after a year, you get the book back and you can do whatever else you want. What has happened in practice so far with every author we've had is that once the year is up, they just let us continue to distribute it, because why not? It's it's bringing in some money for them, and self-publishing is a lot easier said than done. And it's when people actually try to do it, they start realizing this is a lot trickier than it looks. For reasons I could explain in some other panel. I'm not going to do it here.
And that's one of the reasons that you can tell when something is self-published, because there's the little minor details that somehow don't get picked up, or they get dropped. That's why we do a good layout for the book. That's why we do a good cover for the book. It's why we do copy editing and proofreading for the book. And all of that is stuff that you absolutely must do to make a professional published volume.
Yeah,
and we're proud of what we do.
Yeah, we are. We're very proud of it. Yeah, one thing you'll hear people, just so you understand the terms, what happens if you publish for us is that the author will get 50% of whatever income comes in. And when I say whatever comes in, that's after the various distributors take whatever their cut is. But that's the money that we get. Whatever we get, you get half of it. And there's never any fudging about that. And we do all the work and we cover all the costs. It doesn't cost you anything. And the only work you will do once you submit the manuscript to us, and once you've satisfied Walt and have done whatever rewriting that may be necessary. But once we've got a manuscript that we've accepted, the only work you'll ever do after that is that after we've had it professionally copy edited, and we use professionals for this, we don't do it with, these are people who make a living doing it. Then you will be sent the manuscript to look it over and approve or not approve whatever changes are proposed. That's the only other work you'll ever do. And then we will pay you royalties twice a year like publishers generally do. And that's the contract. It's a 2.5-page contract. It's really not complicated at all.
No, it's amazing that our contract is so short.
Well, I use the model I use was Bain Books contract, which was always it's a very good contract, and a lot of publishers have these endless contracts, and honest to God, most of it's just verbiage, and it's unnecessary, and for one thing, we're not trying to gobble up all the rights either. I mean, you retain the dramatic rights, you retain the rights to comic, whatever. The only thing we're having get the rights for 1 year is the right to publish it electronically and the right to publish it as a print-on-demand copy. And if we do a small print run, then we have the right to keep selling the books, even if you decide to leave, until we run out of whatever we printed. We can't do another reprint. And then if it's an audiobook, which we've just started doing audiobooks, then we keep the rights for 5 years, just because we need to. Oh, actually, I think the way it works is we have the right to do one for 2 years. And then if we haven't done one, you get the rights back. But if we have done one or got it under production, then we have the rights for 5 years. That's because audiobooks they're more involved, and there's more costs involved in it. We've tried to keep that contract as simple and straightforward as possible. And the thing that from the very beginning I put in it, because I've been an author for now, 23 years, and I've done it full time for 21 years, is reversion rights. Whatever else happens, you will get the rights to your book back in 1 year. So the worst that happens is you get screwed up for 1 year, but that's it. Whereas most publishers will keep it for a long stretch. In fairness, I have to explain that if I did what a major commercial publisher is doing, which is pay you in advance and do a big major print run through the bookstores, I would have to keep the rights for longer too. I mean, there's a reason for it, but we're trying to publish a certain way. As small presses go, and we are a small press, but as small presses go, we're publishing a book a week starting in October, and that's very unusual. Most small presses don't publish anywhere near.
It's almost like we're not a small press anymore.
As far as our level of publishing, actually, we're not. We're reaching the same level of commercial publishers don't come out with more than, except for tour books. I think Bain Books is the next largest as far as the number of new titles put out every month. And I think we're getting very close to, not quite, but we're getting close to Bain's level. The big advantage, I'm not going to lie to anybody, the big advantage to going through a big commercial publisher, and I tell authors, if you can do it, because the big advantage, partly you'll probably make more money, although that's not necessarily true, but the big advantage you'll get is you'll get more exposure because you'll get into the bookstores and you'll be up on the shelves and people can see you. That's the one thing we can't give you.
We can give you Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, we can give you that.
And we also distribute through Bain. So when you look on Bain Books, you can see our titles. But Eric's right. For whatever bookstores that are remaining, you can't find us there.
They still exist. I mean, Barnes and Noble's still out there. But one thing we do is, and we're gearing this up more, is we're starting to give. Okay, there's a question. What are we most interested in as genres? The thing that we're basically fixed on is science fiction and fantasy. But right now, if you have, we have opened up historical fiction, just straight historical fiction. So if you've written some historical fiction and you'd like us to look at us, get in touch with us. But that's where we are right now. We may expand it later. I'll be honest, if somebody submits a really good Western, I'll publish the damn thing because I grew up reading Westerns and the same stuff.
And the line between science fiction and thrillers is pretty loose too. Shortly, we're publishing a book called Newton Cipher, which reads like Dan Brown should have written it if he was a good writer.
Okay. All right. We're almost out of time. So just really quickly, if you want to get, the best way to stay in touch with us is subscribe to our newsletter. So go to ringoffirepress.com and you'll see just the front page. It'll be right there. Just subscribe to our newsletter and we will keep you informed of what we're doing. And we will set up fairly soon, we haven't done it quite yet, a way that you can send in questions to us, which we haven't done yet, but we're going to start doing that pretty quickly. But if
you've asked us if we take short stories too, we do for the Grantville Gazette. If you go to 1632.org, there's a whole bunch of information for authors who want to get published in the Gazette, whether you write in the 1632 universe or not. And we're really close to being done, I think.
Yeah, I think our time is just about run out because we got the 5-minute warning. I think about 4 minutes ago. I'm not sure. That's about what we have. I will stress one last time. Yeah, you can reach us through the Graphic Gazette. And if you go there, you can post a question and just ask directly because it's a discussion group. We are not yet set up with Ring of Fire Press to do that kind of thing. I think we'll move that direction, but we're not set up yet. But get the news.
No, but you can always sign up for our newsletter.
Yeah, sign up for the newsletter. At least you'll be informed of what's happening. And if we do set up a way you can directly communicate with us there, you'll find out there because we'll post it. I think that's, Walt, you got anything further?
No, just thank you for letting us blather on at you.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that there's at least one person in the audience.
I know there's one because we've got a question from her. I'm not sure which. Okay. Thank you very much. And please go to our website for one thing. If there's any book there that strikes your fancy, by all means, buy it.
Buy 2 or 3.
Yeah, buy more than one. Oh, by the way, we are having our own convention in 3 weeks. So it's called Ring of Fire Convention. Go to the website, the Ring of Fire Press website. There's a whole thing there that'll explain about it and keep you informed. And the newsletter will keep you up to date on it too.
This is because this is the 20th anniversary of the 1632 universe.
Yeah, the book, first novel, 1632, came out in 2000, February 2000. Okay. Thanks again. And I'm pretty sure we're out of time because that 2-minute warning has been up there for at least 2 minutes. So thanks for coming. And I'm actually not sure how you end one of these things.
The big red button that says
All right.
leave.
All right.